donate.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن جاءكم فاسق بنبأ فتبينوا أن تصيبوا قوما بجهالة فتصبحوا على ما فعلتم نادمين. صدق الله العظيم. My dear respected elders and brothers, the media in some way has been the focus of attention in our community due to a program that was aired during the course of this week. And I felt that, inshallah, we will use this opportunity to speak a little about the media and also discuss relevant lessons that has emerged from this entire saga. By and large, we all know that when we talk about the media, our understanding of the media is that it is supposed to provide the latest and most accurate information about matters of public importance, to supply the most latest and most accurate information about matters of public importance. A very wide definition that maybe everyone would agree upon. That is what the media is supposed to do. Now this concept and this definition in itself is not against Islam and Islamic principles. It is not against Islamic principles to let people know about the news. लोगों को दिन और ज़रूरियात के चीज़ों के मुताबिक और जो चीज़ आवाम में और जो चीज़ ज़रूरी है लोगों को आगाह करना, ये इस्लाम के खिलाफ कोई नहीं है. Many years back, Hazrat Mufti Shafi Sahib Rahmatullah Alayhi, the Grand Mufti of Pakistan, wrote a very beautiful magazine and a small booklet which he had entitled Adabul Akhbar, the news protocol. It was an attempt to give an Islamic framework to journalism and media and news. And he gave many examples. And he said the concept of news can be taken back to the hadith of Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And he gives two examples. He said in Jami' Tirmidhi there is a hadith that Hind bin Hala radiyallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that after Fajr, Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to sit in a gathering and people used to come and tell Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, yesterday this happened, last night this happened, in this particular place this happened. And Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, listening to them, used to comment on it. Okay, this happened, this is the lesson you're going to learn from it. This is what happened. So Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to listen to the Sahaba and used to comment on it. Then another hadith he makes mention, and that hadith is that when Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did not see any Sahabi for 2 or 3 days, Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to inquire about him. भाई ये मैंने 2-3 दिन से इस आदमी को देखा नहीं है, उसका क्या हुआ, क्या बीमार है, उनको कोई तकलीफ परेशानी आई है. तो उसका मतलब यह है कि मुसलमानों के बारे में हमें फिक्र करना चाहिए, मुसलमानों की हालात के बारे में हमें फिक्र करनी चाहिए. So he said that for 2-3 days if Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam didn't see anyone, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to inquire. That means from there that we need to be aware about the condition and the aspects of our Muslim community. So this two ahadith, he says, proves the permissibility of media and news that Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had made mention. However, he's given certain conditions with regard to how the news must be propagated, how the news must be given. And one very important point he made mention, and I find it's so important that today many a times people miss this aspect. And he said that those things that are permissible or those things that are not permissible in day-to-day affairs, if those things that are not permissible, for example, those things that are haram, they don't become permissible just because you've got a mic in front of you, or you're speaking to an audience, or you're speaking on a radio, or you're speaking on a TV. He said, जो चीजें हराम है दिन के दिन, जो रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में, तो वो मीडिया में आने की वजह से वो कोई हलाल नहीं बनता. It doesn't become halal just because it came in the media, or you are in the media. So for example, he says, Allah says, لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى يكونوا خيرا منهم. It is not permissible for you to mock at another person. Perhaps the person you are mocking is better than you in the eyes of Allah. So that is a general principle. Right? وَلَا يَخْتَبْ بَعْدُكُمْ بَعْدًا. Don't backbite one another, Allah says in the Quran. Now those things do not become permissible because you are articulate and you got a mic in front of you. Therefore, you got a wide audience, or you got a good pen, or you got a whole audience looking at you in the TV. It doesn't all of a sudden become permissible for you to mock at another person because you got the media in front of you. Or it doesn't become permissible to backbite. Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had said, Man satara Musliman. Whoever conceals the fault of another Muslim, Allah will conceal his faults on the day of Qiyamah. That principle, as much as it applies to day-to-day affairs, it applies to the media. It applies to a person who's got a good pen. It applies to a person who's articulate with his speech. And it also applies to a person who might be engaging in the visual media. Right? So all of that, and that's a very important point. However, after making mention of this, is also a fact that today, by and large, the media does not operate under those particular ethics. What is ethics for them? Ethics has been gone out of the window many a times in many parts of the media. We can't generalize. There are people who are very committed to journalism. They are very committed to their profession. There is no doubt whatsoever. You have to also give credit where it is due. But there is this aspect that many a times overall, there is a particular negative perception with regard to the media, which has been fed by controversy, which has been fed by recent events. Like for example, the news of the world. We know that there was a whole scandal of the news of the world in the United Kingdom. The newspaper had to close down. Nothing was sacred. 4,000 phones were hacked illegally. 4,000 phones were hacked illegally. Even the people who had gone through difficulty, whose children were kidnapped, whose children were taken and abducted, they used to hack those parents' phones to see what had come out, what are they speaking about, so that they can sensationalize the news. They can have an exclusive in their newspaper. To that extent. And now normally people say that there is a difference between administration and the media. Media is separate, media is independent, government is independent. But yet the very CEO of News of the World, Rebecca Brown, who is now, discredited, during her wedding, Gordon Brown and David Cameron, presidents, past presidents, and future president of the United Kingdom attended her wedding. It is said that when Robert Murdoch, who's had a very wide empire, if he had to call any president asking for an interview or asking for a meeting, he would have perhaps got a meeting easier and more willingly than even perhaps another prime minister of another country. And this is the power and the influence of the media. But of course we know, this is the type of things that has happened. You can't then, although news has been provided, but you can't separate the news from the views, from the agenda, from the bias, from the prejudice of the newscaster. You can't do that. You can't separate the news from the bias and prejudice of the media mogul or media baron. All of that is happening. For example, during the Norway bombing that took place, right, where a right-wing Christian was later on found to be guilty, the initial reaction of perhaps most of the media networks was this was a Muslim who was involved, by and large. And not only right-wing newspapers or right-wing media, perhaps everyone started pointing fingers at Muslim. So the Sun newspaper in UK had Al-Qaeda massacre before anything was even done. Never mind Fox News, which is supposed to be extreme right. Even the BBC, who is supposed to be more moderate, supposed to be accurate, made mention that this is a 9/11 moment for Norway. CNN went on to say that the fact that a newspaper had been targeted give indication that it is a Muslim who was worried about the depiction of Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam by the very same newspaper. Afterwards, when these things were found to be false, there was no apology. But that is the media with regard to how it is. Sometimes no ethics, sometimes making mention with regard to all of these type of things. But I can go on to make mention with regard to many aspects. Like for example, there is an aspect that when in the Gulf War, many a times when there was bombing, you used to hear the word smart bombs. That America and UK have become so technologically advanced that smart bombs now only go to the target and no collateral damage, doesn't damage civilians, doesn't harm civilians. Later on, John Pilger was to reveal that out of those smart bombs, only 8% was effective. Let me repeat that. Only 8% was effective. So this is the aspect with regard to the media. Sometimes you get the impression is gather as much information and then distort it as much as possible. Sometimes that happens. So all of this, but I'm not going to talk about the media per se. This is just to give an introduction. What do we learn from this? Let us take lessons, and let me just make mention of why we're making mention of this. The first thing, brothers, as I made mention, there are general rules of the Sharia that do not get in any way side or waylaid just because the media is involved. There is one golden principle of verifying our facts. Verifying our facts is something that the Quran tells us. Now, there's a very interesting incident about Socrates. Socrates was a very famous, poet, philosopher many years back. Many instances and many incidents are related to him. One of the things that is related to him, slightly humorous, he said that one day his wife was nagging at him. Wife was nagging, and he was just keeping silent. Perhaps gives us a good indication what must you do when someone is nagging. But be as it may, keep completely silent. And after a while, she became very, very angry because of his silence while she was railing and she was angry. So she took a bucket of water and threw it upon Socrates. And he said, it has been truly said, after lightning, there is thunder. After lightning, after anger, there is thunder. Water came upon me. So this is one aspect. Now, one day someone came and told Socrates and said, I got something very important to tell you. He said, before you tell me, did it pass the triple filter test? He said, what do you mean by triple filter test? He said, first tell me, is it true or not? Is it true or not? He said, well, I don't know if it is true, but people are talking about it. What did Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said? Forget Socrates, kafa bil mar'i kadiban ay yuhadditha bi kulli ma sami. If you hear a person telling, that someone said such and such, you can call him a liar. It is enough for a person to be called a liar that he relates everything he hears. Call him a liar. Forget Socrates, the Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told us this. So Socrates said, is it true? He said, well, I'm not sure. I heard it from other people. He said, well, it failed the first test. He said, the second thing is it good? And no one passes good messages around. When someone tells you, I got something very important to tell you, it's definitely not good. By and large. I normally tell people is that if there is 100 flights that come safely into OR Tembo, the next day the Star or the newspaper is not going to say 100 flights land safely in OR Tembo. They're not going to probably publish good news. No one is going to buy it. But just see one newspaper headlines, Emirates flight has emergency landing. By and large, half of us will buy that newspaper. This is a fact. So he said, is it good? He said, well, I don't know. No one buys good news. So he said, no, it's not good. He said, the third thing is it useful? So when the person said it's not useful, he said, but I don't want to listen to it. Now what does the Quran tell us? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in ja'akum fasiqun binaba'in fatabayyanu. When anyone comes to you with any news, fatabayyanu. Verify it. We don't do that. Where do we really do that? And even sometimes when we do verify it and we form perceptions, by and large our perceptions sometimes are even exceeding the original news. Like there's a whole particular saga that happened. One of the things that you're reading by and large that pork was certified. There was no pork certified. Yes, there needs to be better balance and better cross-checks. All of that is on its place. But all of a sudden we are just jumping to conclusion without verification. So this is another aspect. The first thing is verification of news is something that the Quran and Hadith tells us. The second aspect that we need to understand, while acknowledging the unethical nature sometimes of the media, while acknowledging sometimes the bias which I have made mention of, we must never underestimate the power of the media to influence people. This is something that we can see it happening. How by and large people have been influenced, how people have perceptions have been formed. The media is something that regulates people's aspirations and hope and their dreams. It's a mirror which projects a particular viewpoint, which sometimes comes across. Look at many things you will find. The media does have a role in informing our opinions. What is even surprising, I found, is even the people who normally say you must boycott the media, they are printing posters on the basis of what the media had said. Even the people who say don't do have nothing to do with the media. They are printing posters and pamphlets on the basis of what the media had said. And I find this very, very amazing. It's something that we got to keep in mind. And those people who say that we will not engage the media, we will do nothing to do with the media, we will close our office doors when they come. You saw the result of what happened. Those people who say that we are not going to engage with the media, you saw what actually happened. Close the doors. But what happens when you close the doors? The perceptions are still formed, whether you like it or you don't like it. And this is something which we have always made mention of in the Jamiyat. As much as we agree with some of the unethical natures, you cannot allow people to rule perceptions that have been made by the media without your contribution in it. From 9/11, previously, maybe before 9/11, Muslims could have afforded to stay in one exclusive private corner. Since 9/11, we are main news, whether we like it or not. Now, when we are main news, either you have a say in what people think about you, or you don't have a say in what people think about you. They still will form perceptions about you, whether you like it, don't like it, engage, don't engage, close your doors, open your doors, people's perceptions are going to be formed. When I went to Rwanda, one of the things I asked the person who was taking me around with regard to the massacre, I said, what was the single biggest cause for the massacre? And he told me, the radio. I said, what do you mean? He said, the radio were publishing from the government side, go and kill this particular group. And people were following the radio. So for people to say that we're going to sit back and not engage or just sit back is something that is extremely short-sighted. So this is the second thing that we've got to keep in mind. Perhaps use the media, but do not allow yourself to be used. I don't know if that is always any way possible, but that is aspect that we've got to keep in mind. Be careful of messages that undermine our values. We have an arbiter. And it's so sad that sometimes we don't use that arbiter. What is our arbiter? The Quran and Hadith. The Quran and Hadith is our arbiter. And that is something that we always got to keep in mind. Whenever anything comes in, we weigh it in the scale of the Quran and Hadith. So you'll find sometimes even words that are used in the media undermine our values. I normally make mention of it. You know, previously people, when they used to write about homosexuality, they used to say sodomy. Now Sodom comes from Sodom, which was a place where Allah punished the people because they were involved in homosexuality. By and large, today you never see anyone using the word sodomy. What do they use for people who are homosexuals? Gay. People who are happy. But we are gay, not they. Why must we give that particular definition to them? Subhanallah. But everyone uses that word. But what have they done? What have they achieved in that? What they've achieved is to lighten the evil nature of what Allah has said is haram. So if you say gay, so what is this? It's something that we've got to keep in mind. What does Allah say? إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يُحِبُّونَ أَن تَشِيَ الْفَاحِشَةَ فِي الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَلِيمٌ. If those who love to publicize immorality, for them is a severe punishment. End of all the back pages. Finish. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يُحِبُّونَ أَن تَشِيَ الْفَاحِشَةَ فِي الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَلِيمٌ. So what is our arbiter? Be careful of messages that come, even sometimes in word, which undermine our values. In all aspects, all aspects that come from the media, I think a very important point, are not necessarily against Islam. Again, the arbiter is our Quran and Hadith. Now all of a sudden we think about transparency, accountability, well that comes from the West. We've got nothing to do with it, subhanallah. Where does it come from? Accountability and transparency didn't come from them. It was born from our teachings. It was Umar radiallahu ta'ala who held people to account. Who were in public places. Last week we made mention of Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, his incident. What was that incident? Umar said, oh Abu Ubaidah, I want to come to your house. So Abu Ubaidah said, oh Umar, don't come to my house, you'll find nothing. Umar perhaps said, no, you're saying no, maybe I must come. And he went into the house, he saw the sparse, living aspects of Abu Ubaidah, and he said, oh Abu Ubaidah, the world has changed many people, but it has failed to change you. But Umar, when any governor used to come from abroad to Medina Sharif to visit his family, Umar used to put a spy on the road. What is he bringing back home? Just give me a note, what is he bringing back home? If he's bringing back home, is he bringing it with his money or public money? Look at what is happening in Limpopo today. I mean, absolutely, these type of things, transparency, accountability, come from Islam. Umar used to ask every governor to write down what he owned before he became a governor, and after he was finished as a governor, what did he own? To compare the two things. So this transparency, accountability is not something that comes from the media, it's our thing. And we have to bring it into our lives. Just because it is highlighted in a particular way from the media doesn't make it wrong. Umar radiallahu anhu was one day speaking, and someone said, oh Umar, we won't listen to you. He said, why won't you listen to me? He said, yesterday you gave a piece of cloth from the Baytul Mal. that cloth would never have been sufficient to make a kurta for you that you have, that kurta or that cloth. So Umar said, you are right. But that cloth, a piece of cloth was also given to my son. My son made over that piece to me. Therefore I made this kurta. There was transparency. He didn't say no. So not every aspect that comes from there, we have to keep in mind. Also we have to develop a comprehensive strategy with regard to engaging and looking at the media. Here the Muslim youth must really look at, becoming journalists, taking a career in journalism to be able to provide the right alternative in terms of values and messages. The one sad part is that when Muslim journalists sometimes go into this field, instead of portraying the values that Islam has, they become even more sensationalizing than even the other media. Look at our normal type of Muslim media supposed to be, our local newspapers. When you look at the backbiting that take place, they even got a particular column for that also. Now they got first of all it was wrong, now they got a particular column. What do they call it? Panchat Corner or something like that. Subhanallah. Now when we're going to go into journalism and we don't have our own values, then how is that going to happen? So go into it with our own values. And I think lastly I will make mention, it is an important point and you won't get another chance. We have to do it in this particular time. When you hear some of the statements that coming, people many a times speak about things without, looking at things, without, giving thought to things. Sometimes it's just blurting out things. Many a times people say, you see what has happened? Now from now onwards you don't need any certifying authority. Go and do whatever you want to do. I think that is one of the most short-sighted things that one can ever say. Perhaps this whole thing has highlighted the fact that we need a certifying authority and we need to hold it accountable. It must be accountable. And let me just say, the food chain of supply has become so complex that sometimes it becomes even difficult for an organization that is in there all the time to be able to reach the bottom of it, never mind an individual like you and I. So how can people say that you don't need a certifying authority without providing a credible alternative? When you don't have credible alternatives and people speak without understanding and being short-sighted, you have what happened in Azadwal. I'm just giving you these examples. We need to understand that yes, we need a certifying authority. It needs to be accountable. We need to keep it. And then after we need to keep it accountable, we also need to be accountable. Then we mustn't say that, it's a Muslim. I saw halal sign. I don't need to ask anyone after that. But you won't use that same criteria to go and deposit your money into someone's account. If someone comes up and say that I guarantee you a 30% return on your investment, you won't go invest in him. You won't invest your money with him on the basis that his name is Muhammad. Because you value your money, you go and make your checks. This 30% he's saying he's going to give it, can he deliver? Is he right? There we don't say, is Muhammad, I can accept him. All of a sudden, Muhammad opens up a restaurant and doesn't have a certifying authority and he says halal. But he's a Muslim, he's saying it's halal, I can accept it. But why don't you use that same criteria when you want to invest your money? There you will make all the necessary checks. So is our halal and haram gone so down that we don't worry about it? Is our investments more important? So these are the type of things that you and I need to understand. And many a times what happens on the ground does have an impact upon the people who are making decisions. But if the people on the ground are not going to worry, then obviously that is going to have a ripple effect. So these are some of the things that I have made mention of. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq of understanding and making amal. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.